This is the Political Paradox Podcast.
Coming up on the show, we talk about the Canada-U.S. price gap. Can government legislation really fix this problem? Then the NDP are on the electoral reform bandwagon again, plus more fake statistics from the climate change movement. Is anybody still taking these guys seriously?
Your Political Paradox starts now.
Hey, how you doing? It's Tuesday, December 16th, 2014. The Political Paradox Podcast is on the air. I want to apologize a little bit. I guess if you've been listening to me for the last 3 episodes, the intro keeps changing, but you know, I'm playing around with different styles. I like what I just did there with the kind of the preview and then right into the show, as opposed to the really long 1-minute intro that I've had in previous episodes. I don't know about this theme music though. Might change that up a little bit. But we're getting closer to the way I want the show to sound. I hope you're doing well. The Imitation Game has not opened yet. I was talking about that movie that I really wanted to see about the Allied forces in World War II cracking the Nazis' secret code. I checked out the Cineplex website, and it looks like it opens this Friday, but it's only in French. At least it was listed in French on the website. Now, perhaps maybe that was some sort of an error or whatever. But yeah, The Imitation Game coming soon to a theater near you. Now, watch, the movie's going to be really disappointing because I've been hyping it up and I've been really looking forward to it. As mentioned, this is the Political Paradox Podcast. You can check us out online at politicalparadox.ca, and you can join us regularly as we take a look at news stories from Canada and around the world. There is so much going on. We'll see how much I get through this week, and I may be back next week. And that's another thing I wanted to mention too. In the new year, I would like to get on to doing this show every week, not every other week, but every week. So every Tuesday, you know that I'm going to be there for you. It's a little more easier to remember, more consistent. So yeah. Okay, so let's start here. We're talking about the Canada-U.S. price gap. Canada's Competition Bureau is getting new powers to investigate why many items cost less in the United States. Industry Minister James Moore said last week the aim is to ensure Canadian consumers pay prices in line with Americans. The legislation would allow the Commissioner of Competition, that sounds sophisticated, we now have a Commissioner of Competition, to probe geographic price discrimination. That would include having the power to force companies to show how they arrived at their pricing. Studies show goods in Canada cost up to 25% more than in the United States. And I mean, you know, that's part in due to various taxes, which is true. CBC Marketplace, that TV show, it's usually on Friday evenings. That's a show that I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with, because they've done a number of these episodes on, you know, the Canada-U.S. price gap, and they compare prices of the exact same products. And yes, you do find that products in Canada cost more. And of course, the conclusion that Marketplace always seems to come to at the end of every episode is, well, you need some sort of government oversight because the big, greedy, you know, corporatalist, you know, fat cats are, you know, price gouging us, and, you know, we're suckers and Canadians are just used to paying more. And the thing about Canadians being used to paying more, that certainly is part of it. But, the show really did not look at all angles when they did those episodes, because there was no mention in there of excise taxes, sales taxes, tariffs, and regulations on certain industries which force Canadian prices to be higher. A great example is the book industry. An American bookseller, or an international bookseller even, is not allowed to place a book directly on Canadian shelves. There has to be a Canadian distributor of that book. So, of course, that's going to drive the price up, because to suggest that there has to be a Canadian distributor, but they're not allowed to charge a little extra revenue for overhead, is kind of ridiculous. So, in many cases, it's government regulation which has caused this problem to begin with. So I find it a little, interesting to say the least, that government regulation is going to somehow fix this problem. So yeah, look at the, you just need to look at the, the regulations that are in place now. And as I said, a great example is the book industry. And there's many other industries like that as well. Sales taxes and things like that. But yeah, so that's the real reason behind the Canada-US price gap. Not the evil, corporate fat cats. NDP leader Thomas Mulcair, he was in British Columbia over the weekend and finished up yesterday with an announcement about electoral reform with NDP MP Murray Rankin. It is said that if the NDP were to win a majority in the next federal election, a priority would be to change the system so that no party could achieve a winner-takes-all result. Again, the NDP is promising to strike an all-party task force with a mandate to consult with experts and others on the best design for a mixed-member proportional representation system, which the party is advocating. The system would allow voters to cast a ballot for a local MP and another vote for the party from the list of candidates who would be ranked in preference. Now, they brought this up in the House of Commons a couple of weeks ago. Now, that motion was rejected, of course, because the Conservatives have a majority. So any vote is going to go to the Conservatives' way anyway. Now, proportional representation, like a lot of progressive ideas, sound like a good idea on the surface, but when you actually get around to doing the research, their ideas just don't seem practical. The idea behind proportional representation is if a certain party, let's say the NDP, for instance, if they get 12% of the vote, that they would get 12% of the seats in the House of Commons, which, okay, that kind of makes sense. And so when you do the math, there's 308 seats across Canada. So 12% of 308 is 35, 36, somewhere around there. My problems with proportional representation are twofold. One, who would decide and how would it be decided which of those, 35 or 36 MPs get those 308 seats? Because you have 308 candidates running across the country. So who would decide, who would make those decisions? You can guarantee it'll never be you nor I. It'll be going to those who are the most politically connected. And, politicians, they'll do anything, to get one of those seats. It's like lifeboats on the Titanic, right? Not everybody can get what they want, right? There's 308 candidates and only, 36 seats available. So something has to give at some point. So you're giving more power to the political parties to decide who gets those seats. Now, proposing a system called mixed member proportional. So basically we would still have the system that we have now where, your local representative, there's 308 seats to represent the 308 ridings, and there'd be another pool of seats on the side. I don't know, maybe, 20 or 30 seats, which are made up of the mixed, of the proportional representation. But still, I mean, who would be making those decisions? So that's one problem that I have with it. The other thing that I don't like is, what about independent candidates? Right? Under this system, it would make it impossible, as I see it, to run as an independent candidate and win a seat. I mean, because if you have, let's just say hypothetically across the country, you have 5 or 6 independent candidates who end up winning, which, it occasionally happens. How would you go about divvying up those independent seats? You can't. So you would have to run with a political party, and anything that kind of silences voices, I'm not a fan of. So those are the two reasons that I'm kind of wary of proportional representation. Now, if somebody could explain to me, and address my concerns on it, maybe I would change my mind on it. But so the system we have now isn't the best, because, you could have, for instance, a majority government winning with only getting, 30% of the vote. I would be more in favor of a system, I think it's called a runoff ballot, where, you rank your choices, and then, the party with, so if your number one choice gets knocked off the ballot, then your vote goes to your second choice. And you just keep doing like a process of elimination until you get down to 2 contenders, in which case then you can say that, 50% of the people voted for this person, which I might be more in favor of that sort of a system. But yeah, so just be very wary of proportional representation. It's, again, it sounds like a good idea on the surface, but those are my major concerns with it. Okay, moving on to the big scandal from last week revealed here in Ontario by the Toronto Star, and that is collusion between the beer store and the LCBO. Now, for those who don't live in Ontario or don't know how the system works here, there's really 2 ways to get alcohol in Ontario. One is the beer store. Talk about a creative name. It's owned by the major beer brewers. Okay. That's where you get your 12 packs, your 2-4s. If you want wine, spirits, other liquor, you have to go to the LCBO, which stands for the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. Now, you can get some beer at the LCBO, but not too much. Now, it's been revealed that there was an arrangement for the last 14 years at least, and I'd imagine going back long before that as well, between the LCBO and the beer store. It's a 10-page document that was that came to light. Its bureaucratic wording spells out precisely how beer drinkers are being gouged. The core of the scheme comes in the section that sharply details beer selling rules for the 2 rival distributors, one government-owned and the other privately run, to sharply limit any competition between them. Consistent with historical practice, LCBO will not sell beer in packages containing more than 6 containers. So, if you're not a big beer drinker, such as I am, I prefer my Ryan Coke myself. So if I do buy beer, I usually just end up going to the LCBO, because a 6-pack will last me literally 4 months. All right. And that's all you can get at the LCBO. I never noticed that before, that you can't get anything larger than a 6-pack at the LCBO. That's because they have agreed upon this. So why would the LCBO agree to tie its hands in such a way? The effect, of course, is to deny drinkers the cost savings of a 12-pack or 2-4s available at the privately run beer store, forcing them to pay the higher tab for each individual six-pack. So basically, they're running a monopoly on, 12 and 24 beer packs, right? There's nobody else in the province who sells them. The LCBO has agreed not to sell them. This is what happens when you have government involved in, private business, because this goes right back to the Mike Harris years here on the Ontario government. It started under them in the year 2000. Another clause spells out the architecture of non-competition. The LCBO will not sell to restaurants and bars of any of the major brands not carried in its regular stores. So basically, they're the only people who are able to sell to the restaurants. Therefore, they can sell the beer to the restaurants at whatever they want because there's no competition. Bottom line, competition keeps people honest. It keeps prices low. So I've kind of already made all my comments on this article, but look, this is crony capitalism. And I'll go into detail, I'm sure, in a future episode about the difference between capitalism and crony capitalism, because there's a big difference and people often confuse the two. And it's very important that we know the difference between the two. The next story that caught my eye in the news last week was about global warming. Now, look, can we just come out and call these people, the climate change movement, hoaxers? The global warming hoaxers. That's what they are. This is over on the Real Science blog. A guy named Stephen Goddard is doing great work over there, doing his own research, comparing actual statistics and not just listening to what the media tells him. Listen to this. The United States Historical Climatology Network, the USHCN, has 1,218 stations in their database. Prior to 1990, they typically recorded temperatures of about 97% of these stations. But for some reason, the USHCN has been reporting monthly temperatures at a smaller and smaller percentage of stations since 1990, and now about 30% of those temperatures are completely missing. What the NCDC does in those cases is to fabricate temperatures for the missing stations. And he has a graph here which shows the interesting increase in the number of stations which are not reporting data, and that number is going up and up all the time. Steve plotted the annual temperature for the fabricated data and the measured temperature, and when the measured temperatures, the actual data that was being reported showed no warming since 1990, but the fake temperatures are warming at 7.3 degrees per century. These fake temperatures introduced a huge warming bias into the NCDC U.S. temperature record and account for 100% of all warming reported since 1990. Nearly 40% of the 2014 final temperatures are marked with an E, which is even higher than the 29% of stations which are completely fake. This indicates that they are also making up temperatures for a large number of stations which actually do have thermometer data. Now, I've linked to this article in the show notes, and I highly suggest that you take a look at this article, take a look at the graphs that Steve has created. I'm also going to put a link to his Real Science blog on the general links page over at politicalparadox.ca, because it's a great site. Check it out if you're interested in this whole global warming stuff. Or climate change. Sorry. See, they changed the name of it. It used to be global warming, but now it's climate change. Well, I mean, of course, that's what the climate changes. That's what it does. My issue with the whole climate change thing is, I consider myself fairly open-minded, and right now I'm leaning more towards, there hasn't been any measurable warming since 1998. But if you can show me data that proves otherwise, I will listen to it. But the problem is every time data like this comes out, it's almost inevitably every time the data has been doctored, it has been manipulated. Older temperatures have been reduced to make the warming trend look bigger than it actually is. And in some cases, data is removed completely, in order to, prove your point. So if you can show me some data, please, which has not been manipulated, I'd like to see that. Thank you very much. Now, when it comes to this climate change stuff, I don't know if, one, if you can prove that the planet is warming, two, if humans are the cause of it, and three, would the results of the planet warming up, just a couple of degrees be all that detrimental? You always hear about the bad things that global warming is going to do, but what about the good things? Less irrigation, longer lifespan, deserts blooming, that sort of thing. There's also an assumption that is being made, and I think a very arrogant assumption, which is that the climate we have now is the best possible climate, and all stops must be pulled out in order to maintain that. How do you know? I mean, we don't know. 200 years ago, when temperatures were supposedly lower, I'm willing to bet there were people back then saying, "Oh no, I don't want a warmer planet." But look at it now. Look, this doom and gloom stuff has been going on for a long, long time. I came across an article, actually, I think it was on the before mentioned Real Science blog last week, an article from February of 1837. Which talks about the Maldives Islands just off the coast of Chile, and they were going to be underground underwater within 30 years. Well, those islands are still around, so it's a very popular tourist destination. So those islands. There was one newspaper article 200 years ago was predicting that they were going to be underwater, and that hasn't happened yet. So there just seems to be a lot of these failed predictions. And of course, when the predictions don't come true, they change their story. Many of the people in the climate change movement now are, in many cases, literally the same people who, as recently as 1980, were telling us about the coming, ice age. So I don't know what to believe anymore. But, again, if we have some consistent data that has not been manipulated, I'd be willing to listen to it. And our final story today doesn't have any kind of a political commentary attached to it. It's just a story that I found interesting. And so every now and again, I'll toss you a bit of a curveball. It's about coffee. And Canadians love their coffee. And this article from the Financial Post last week is titled "McDonald's Making Gains in Canadian Coffee Wars as U.S. Sales Decline Deepens." A worry smile is all John Betts reveals when he is asked about Burger King's imminent takeover of the beloved Canadian coffee chain Tim Hortons. "Nothing surprises me," says the president and CEO of McDonald's Canada, the 44-year-old veteran at the Oak Brook, Illinois chain who took over the Canadian operation in 2008. "The market is always dynamic and competitive," Mr. Betts added, but his assured demeanor at the top of the country's second biggest quick service restaurant chain behind Tim Hortons is bolstered by two key facts. With steadily increasing sales over the past 5 years, McDonald's Canada is not going through the woes of its U.S. division, which posted its steepest monthly decline in same-store sales in more than 14 years in November. That is due in no small part to the second fact, the Canadian unit's ability to steal market share in the quick serve coffee category during that period in a market that was already saturated with other coffee purveyors. McDonald's Canada's share of the brewed coffee business at restaurants grew another 2.5% for the year in August and now holds a market share of 13% double what it was in 2009, according to market research from NPD Group Canada. Tim Hortons is still the dominant player in the brewed market. McDonald's is stealing share from all the other players, Starbucks, Second Cup, Coffee Time, as well as Tim Hortons, said Robert Carter, executive director at MPD. It was a smart move for them to focus on the number one menu item in the Canadian marketplace. If you can get the coffee right and build the platform quality of that, it can benefit your overall business and give you a good halo effect for your other products. In other words, improving the coffee helped carry an association of better quality to all McDonald's products, even the ones that had not changed. So now I still prefer my Tim Hortons, but McDonald's coffee is very, very good. Very good. And so if you're a coffee drinker, check out McDonald's coffee. It's not that bad. And the neat thing I like about McDonald's coffee is they have that sticker system. So I think if you collect, seven stickers, you drink 7 coffees, you get the 8th one free. And, I'll tell you, when Tim Hortons roll up the rim comes around, those odds seem a lot better than the Tim Hortons roll up the rim. Because when I'm rolling up the rims, I might get a coffee maybe every 15 rolls. McDonald's, it's guaranteed. I think whatever, how many stickers you need, 7 or 8. But no, the coffee's not bad, not bad. So I'm giving a thumbs up to McDonald's coffee. It's not too bad. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Political Paradox podcast. To check out the blog, to listen to past episodes, and check out show notes, check out politicalparadox.ca. My name is Paulie Sai, and I leave you with these words from Harry Brown. Whatever the issue, let freedom offer us 100 choices instead of having government force one answer on everyone. Talk to you next time. It might even be next week. So keep an eye on the website, politicalparadox.ca, and we'll see what we come up with. Have a good week.